So I just want to say that I have my talking notes on a separate screen, so that's why I'm looking off to my left. But basically, I'm not going to be talking about a specific crime or crime story, but relating how the early Chicago School of Criminology relates to juvenile delinquency. And in my opinion, the theory also makes sense for adults, but in this case, I'm just going to be focusing on juvenile delinquency. A really commonly used phrase is that people are products of their environments. I've heard it a multitude of times. I'm sure you guys, as my peers, have heard it a multitude of times. I've heard it in jails, whether that's a jail, a prison, adult, or juvenile. I've also heard it in courtrooms and from people who are on probation. And like I said, it's just a common thing you hear people say is that they're from what they call the hood, or the streets raised them, nobody knows anything about them, or how they grew up, where they came from, who raised them. And this is also portrayed really heavily in media as well. You see it in Hollywood movies, it's on social media, TV shows, you name it, it's all over. And so essentially the Chicago School originated in the early 21st century. I think it was roughly 1892, but basically the early 21st century, and focused on urban, social, and environmental factors, and those on crime. It was based out of Chicago, Chicago being one of the oldest and biggest cities that we have here in the US. The theory originated as cities were quickly growing to close to over 100,000 people and more. Like I said, the urbanization was quickly happening and cities were becoming a very, dominant way for Americans to live. In the theory, we see that criminologists essentially rejected the Darwinian logic that criminals were biologically inferior, and they theorized that crime happened because people who were poor had slipped through the cracks to the bottom of the social hierarchy or the social pyramid. These people were not committing crimes because they were born into the life of crime, or because, like I said, they were biologically wired to commit crime, but because they were pushed by their social and external environment. Sean McKay came to the conclusion that it was the nature of the neighborhood, not the nature of the individual within the neighborhood. So going off of that, childhood is a very impressionable stage, since the brain is still developing, or children are still forming their opinions on things, of deciphering what is right and what is wrong. And in this stage, it's very easy to see somebody doing something and then thinking, oh, I can do that, or that's an okay thing to do. And that's pretty much what kids do. They see their parents on the street, if they're raised in this environment, and they think, oh yeah, I can totally do that. That's okay. Like, if my parents are doing it, I can do it. A personal example of this is when I was working in the Juvenile Detention Center in Montana. Many of the youth came from the Native American reservations, and the reservations are poorly funded. They're often forgotten about by the state governments, and they're known to be, they are filled with gang violence, drug and sex trafficking, you name it. So youth who come from these reservations, whether they're incarcerated or not, I guess it's more so whether they've been caught or not. Not all youth are committing these crimes or affiliated with this, but those that are see their parents affiliated with gangs. They see their parents selling drugs, doing drugs. Like I said, they think it's okay. Many of the youth come in and they're on drug detox at 12, 13 years old, and they're doing these drugs because they see their parents doing them, and their parents are using them as drug mules. So that's seen on the reservations a lot, especially in Montana. I'm sure it is in other places as well. Like I said, this is just personal experience. And I know that this happens a lot off of them too. I've heard it in the detention center here in Bryan, Texas. And it's just those who grew up in these poorer environments, went to poorly funded schools, overall felt that they were neglected and rejected by society and fell into, fell into the cracks of the social hierarchy. Finally, another segment of this theory is the social disorganization theory, which states that people, or in this case youth, as I'm talking about, grow up in socially disorganized settings are more likely to commit these crimes because of the absence of social control mechanisms.